Hey everyone, I'm Michael Short. Come on, let's go outdoors. Well, a really special conversation tonight. Now, I don't know how many of you have this magazine. It's the Conservation Magazine put out by the Alberta Conservation Association. And in it is a very interesting article. And if you've not seen it, I suggest you pick it up and give it a read. It's called The Bow River. It's Alberta's worst kept secret. What's going on that river? Well, we're going to get into that in just a second, but it's written by a couple of pretty smart fellows. Paul Christensen, who is a fisheries biologist responsible for the Bow, and Dr. Michael Sullivan. Of course, I've had the opportunity to feature Mike Sullivan on a number of stories over the years. And these two have come together to talk about fishing and fishing stress in the Bow River. Now, we could do this interview with more biologists to get more of, the science behind everything. But I thought I would take a different tack, and real pleasure to welcome Mike Robinson. He is the owner and operator of Bow River Blog Guided Fishing Tours. And full disclosure, I had an opportunity to spend a day on the river this past spring with Mike. So we've got a bit of a relationship there. Mike, first of all, thanks so much for taking time and talking to us.
Thank you, Michael. It's a real pleasure to be here with you again tonight. I also watch a lot of your videos, and I learn a lot of things from your show. So it's a huge blessing for me to be here tonight.
Well, I appreciate that, sir. Now, the reason I wanted you on this program and to deal with this particular topic is you are a professional guide on the river, but how many days have you spent out there?
Oh, I'd say at least 80 to 100 for sure. Like with COVID, everything went crazy. People couldn't do much indoors, Michael. So they took to the outdoors, which is amazing.
So, of course, the thrust of the article talks about, overfishing, utilizing so many anglers. In fact, one of the stats puts it at somewhere around 200,000 hours during the summertime. And that's even busier than Lesser Slave Lake, which is a very popular spot for anglers in Alberta. And of course, that's resulting in a finite number of fish being caught multiple times. Mike, what have you seen out on the river this past year and maybe compared to other years that you've been out there?
Sure. Yeah. Well, like I said, Michael, there's a couple things that are in combination, right? Calgary's not getting any smaller for population wise, right? Calgary's always growing. There's new neighborhoods cropping up. Like I drive and I see new neighborhoods coming up all the time. And then coupled with the fact that we had, a lockdown or, we had 2 COVID years where, people really couldn't do anything indoors. Like you couldn't even go to a movie or all these things were closed. Right. So it brought a lot of those people from doing stuff indoors. It took all those people and moved them into some outdoor activities, whether it be biking or fishing or, a lot of people took up fishing. All those people combined with the people that were already there, already using the river, just it grew and grew and grew. Now we have a big population of people that they're fishing the river. Now, some of these people, they're advanced anglers, so they know certain things. There's certain ethics involved with that. There's certain ways to handle a trout. There's certain things you do and you don't do. But a lot of these new people, I was a new once before. Obviously, everybody starts somewhere, and that's okay. But, there's not enough, I believe, education in the beginning where, number one, how to remove a hook from a fish's mouth. How do I do that? I never knew that as a beginner. So with all these beginner fishermen, coupled with the people that are already using the river, say like the intermediate or advanced angler, it added that much more pressure to the fishery, which was already, in my opinion, on a decline as it was. So, it's almost created the perfect storm for, a serious steep decline in the Bow River fishery.
So when you look at it from a whole, I mean, it's easy for, I guess, not easy, but we do it. We sit back and we in our comfortable chairs and we say, well, this is a problem and that's a problem. And this group's a problem and that group is a problem. It's trying at this point, I think, trying to find solutions, and certainly everything from closures to maybe a rotational system of when the river can be fished. Where do you come down on those types of suggestions, Mike?
Yeah, I believe the main question to ask here, Michael, is how can we all do our own part? What does that look like for me? So do I reduce the amount of trips that I take? Do I reduce the amount of, I already do a good job of this, I believe, but do I reduce the amount of time I handle the fish? Do I try to reduce the amount of time both myself and my clients reduce, how long we play the fish? I believe that's something we discussed in some of these biologist meetings that really wasn't included. Like, I see guys playing out fish way too long. How many fish I catch? Is 10 fish good enough? I can be the trendsetter for that. I can pass that on to my clients where I say, listen, guys, the fishery's in a decline here. Excuse me. What is it okay if we go out there and we catch, say, 10 fish and we put a limit on the amount of fish we catch a day? So I believe we can all do our part to and ask ourselves, how can we do our part to get this fishery back to, where the recycled rate is lower? That's ultimately what we want to do. Recycled rate right now is between 5, 6, and 7. So that means basically those 5, 6, or 7 fish are getting caught that many times a season, which, according to the biologists, the Bow River is good at making babies. Okay. So we don't have a problem with, spawning or anything like that. What we have a problem with is these fish growing up and getting to be a certain age where they're getting caught so many times over and over and over again.
In terms of closing the bow down, though, I mean, if you were to do that for a season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons, the amount of pressure that would be on all the surrounding tributaries would be immense. And I'm not sure that we would really dig ourselves out of the hole.
The Bow River is a linchpin. Okay. Meaning if the Bow River collapses, all the other eastern slopes fisheries around Calgary will also collapse because all that pressure will be dispersed over there. So we're talking the Old Man, the Red Deer River, the Cardinal River, the Livingston River, the Castle, everything within an hour and a half, 2 hours reach of the Bow River will start to get all that pressure, right? And eventually that will collapse as well. So we can't, basically what the biologist said is we can't have the Bow River shut completely off. And that's some of the things that they said, like, we're making suggestions here. We're not saying we're going to write this in stone. So, don't go out and write stories and, blog about, hey, the biologist said we're going to close the river. No, we're running different scenarios to see if this is going to reduce the recycled rate, like we talked about earlier, right? So, they come up with, okay, what happens if we shut the river down in the peak months? The Bow River is primarily a summer fishery, okay? They know that by the creel studies that they've done, right? So most of the users of the Bow River, the fishing people, use the river from July till September. Okay, so let's run a scenario where we close the river for these 3 months and they push the button and go, and that only gets the recycled rate back to 4. Okay, so let's run the scenario where we close the river for 1 year straight, December to December, and we see where that's going to get the recycled rate, and they push the button and it only gets it down to like 3. Okay. And then they run the scenario again and say, we're going to close the river for 2 years, no fishing, nothing. And that gets the recycled rate back to 1.5, which is within tolerance, right? Which will let the fishery gradually come back up. The fish will grow bigger, et cetera, and it'll lower the recycled rate properly. So, we're running all kinds of different scenarios.
So, Mike, let me ask you, unfortunately, we live in a society of us and them, and you being one of them, as you said, you throw hardware into the river. You're going after these fish with spinners and lures and that type of thing, and then you've got the fly anglers. So I guess it's kind of an observation that kind of division exists to some degree, but also is there anything to, if we strictly went to a dry fly scenario on the river, would that have an impact? What if we just allowed hook, single barbed or barbless hooks? The argument. You've been around it for so long. Where are your thoughts on, the tools of the trade when it comes to conserving fish populations?
Yeah, I think those suggestions are definitely something we can look at. I'm not the type of person that goes, "Oh, that's absurd. Oh, that'll never fly." You know what I mean? But come on, right? So like I said, I'm looking inside myself to figure out, okay, is this feasible? Can we do this? I'd say realistically, 80% of the anglers that use the river, maybe it's not that high, maybe it's 70% of the anglers that use the river that don't, they're not fly fishing. Do you think it's a good idea if you put a single barbless hook or even a single barbed hook on your rapalas? Will that decrease handling time? Do you think that's going to decrease the amount of damage done to the fish's mouth? Et cetera, et cetera. I'm all for whatever helps the fishery. So if that's what it takes, then that's what we do. I think if we exclude the us versus them, because that's what I heard a lot of. I heard a lot of that in some of these meetings, like, he wants to point the finger at me. But, some of the biologists basically say, okay, well, can we shut the treble hook thing down? Both the biologists said basically that's 1%, right? And there's been studies done, treble hooks, barbless hooks, single hooks. Yeah, a treble hook, if you don't know what you're doing, definitely causes more damage to a fish, increases handling time. When I was catching my fish this year, I didn't even really bring the fish out of the river. Quickly, maybe for one picture, if it was even worth it. For me, sometimes it's like, and that brings us to another thing: is a picture even worth it? Okay, so how can I do my part? Hey, maybe next year, Michael, we're not going to take pictures of these fish because we already have a lot of pictures. You're a repeat customer. You've got 5 years worth of pictures. Maybe we don't need to do that anymore. So we can be pioneers for these kinds of things, right? So I'm not excluding myself from using like a single barbed hook or single barbless hook. Is that going to really make a big difference? It might, and I'm willing to try it.
Well, we're not going to solve the issue tonight. Unfortunately, I think you've got a good head start on maybe compared to many anglers, Mike. And I really want to thank you. The discussion around this issue is going to continue. And I do believe that Alberta Environment and Parks will be planning another fish consultation process coming up in January. So hopefully folks like yourself are going to come out and offer some thoughts, some solutions, rather than just pointing, as you say, pointing fingers. Mike, you care so deeply about the river. You care so much about our resources. That certainly comes through. And we really thank you for spending some time and sharing your thoughts on this issue tonight.
Thank you so much, Michael. It's an honor and privilege to be here. Thank you.